after an offer is accepted. This is a step-by-step guide for Texas buyers. Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to walk you through exactly what happens after your offer is accepted on a home in Texas. I'm Caroline Deckard with the Park Properties Group at the Phyllis Browning Company, and this is one of the most common questions I get from buyers, especially first-time buyers or someone who hasn't bought in a long time, or buyers relocating from other states. Because the moment your offer is accepted, it actually feels like the end of something. You finally got the house, but in reality, it's the start of a completely new set of steps that runs anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks in most transactions. Sometimes shorter, sometimes a little longer. And if you know what's happening at each stage, you will feel much more in control of the process. So this video is for the buyer who just went under contract, the buyer who is about to go under contract, or anyone who wants to understand what is going on behind the scenes when they hear the phrase, "We are under contract." Okay, starting with number one. Contract execution and the effective date, because the very first thing that happens after your offer is accepted is that the contract has to be fully signed by both parties. And the moment it is signed by everyone with the last signature and delivered, that is what triggers what we call the effective date. And the effective date matters a lot because every other timeline in the contract is measured from that day. The option period, the earnest money deadline, the financing deadlines, and the closing date. So before you do anything else, you and your realtor should confirm the effective date in writing. Because if there's any confusion about when the clock started, every other date can get miscounted. And small counting errors at the beginning become big problems later. Once the effective date is set, your realtor will typically send you a summary of the key dates so you have them all in one place, which leads us to number two, delivering the earnest money. It's very important. And the option fee, because in Texas, a buyer typically has a very short window to deliver the earnest money to the title company and, when applicable, the option fee to the seller. So all of those we typically put into one check and we take to the title company. These are two different things and they actually do get confused. So let me clarify. The earnest money is a good faith deposit that shows the seller you're serious. It sits with the title company in escrow until closing, and then it's applied to your purchase. The option fee is what the buyer pays in Texas for the unrestricted right to terminate the contract during the option period. And when and how that fee is handled is really governed by the contract and TREC rules. Typically here in San Antonio, that goes to the title company. The title company holds it in escrow also, and the buyer gets credit at closing. So if your realtor is telling you to move fast on these, that's why. The delivery is time sensitive and missing a deadline can put your contract at risk. Which brings us to number three, the option period and your inspection. Because once the contract is executed and the fees are delivered, the option period begins, and this is your due diligence window. In most Texas transactions, the option period runs maybe 7 to 10 days. And this is your chance to inspect the home, review it in detail, and decide whether you want to move forward. So the very first thing that should happen inside that option period is scheduling the general home inspection. I always encourage buyers to use an inspector who is experienced with the type of home they're buying, especially if it's an older home in a neighborhood like Alamo Heights, Olmos Park, Terrell Hills, King William, or Monte Vista, where original plumbing, older electrical and foundation history, roof age, stucco, or tile transitions all require someone who knows what they're looking at. And depending on the home that you're looking at, we might also add a specialty inspection, for example, foundation, pool, a sewer scope, mold, termite, HVAC. And once those reports come back, you'll typically have a meeting with your realtor to go through it. It's the separate, different major systems and structural items we like to separate from the cosmetic items. And once you decide what you want to do next, we then do something called a repair, negotiation, or amendment. Because after you review the inspection, you often go back to the seller with a request. That's a normal part of the process. It's not aggressive, and the request usually takes the form of an amendment asking for repairs, closing cost credit, a price reduction, or some combination of the three. The seller can read all of it, some of it, or none of it, or counter. So this becomes its own negotiation on top of the original contract. And the practical guidance I give buyers here is that to focus on the items that actually matter, the safety items, the systems and structures, and to be careful about turning the option period into a wish list. Since a buyer asks for everything often gets less than a buyer who focuses on what's important. And this negotiation has to be completed within the option period. Or you have to formally exercise your termination right. Or you can let the option period expire and accept the home as is. So the timing here is real, which brings us to number 5, appraisal and lender activity running in parallel. Because while the inspection and repair conversation is happening, the lender's not just standing still. If you're financing the purchase, your lender is ordering the appraisal, processing your loan documents, verifying employment, running underwriting, and moving through their pipeline. And the appraisal is often ordered during or shortly after the option period, depending on the contract. So the appraisal becomes its own conversation, typically a week or 2 after you go under contract. And if the appraisal comes in like at or above the contract price, everyone breathes easy and the loan moves forward. But if the appraisal comes in low, that opens a separate negotiation. A buyer can ask the seller to lower the sales price to match. The seller can then hold firm and the buyer can bring additional cash to close the gap. Or all parties can walk depending on the contract's appraisal contingency. So the appraisal is one of those milestones that gets less attention than the inspection, but can have just as much of an impact. And while all this is happening, the lender is asking you for documents, lots of documents, tax returns, pay stubs, bank statements, gift letters, explanation for large deposits, and anything else the underwriter needs. And my advice is always the same. Respond fast. Avoid making major changes to your financial picture during the transaction. Do not open a new credit card account. Don't make a big purchase. Don't change jobs unless it's unavoidable, because any of these things can trigger a re-underwriting and delay closing. Which brings us to number 6, title work. Because in the background, the title company is doing its own set of steps. They are pulling the title commitment, which is essentially a preview of what your title insurance policy will cover. They're researching a chain of title on the home. They're ordering surveys and an HOA resale certificate if applicable. They're pulling tax certificates, and they're looking for any liens, easements, encroachments, defects that need to be resolved before the home can be conveyed to you. Once the title commitment is delivered, you and your realtor should review it carefully, since there may be items that require action, and an easement running through the property that you are not aware of, a lien from a previous owner that needs to be released, an old restrictive covenant that limits what you can do to the home, and any of these things may need to be addressed, and typically do need to be addressed before closing. If the home is in an HOA or condo area, the title company will also coordinate the delivery of the resale certificate or condo documents, which you should also review because they contain rules, restrictions, dues, and financial information for the community. Which leads us to number 7, the final walkthrough. Because in the days leading up to closing, you and your realtor will schedule a final walkthrough of the home. And the purpose of this walkthrough is not another inspection. No, it's to check to confirm 3 things. Number 1, the home is substantially in the same condition as when you went under contract, and that any agreed upon repairs have actually been completed, and that any items that were supposed to convey with the home, like appliances, fixtures, personal property listed in the contract, they're still there. And so during this walkthrough, you're opening cabinets, you're testing appliances, you're running the water, you're flipping switches, and you're looking around to make sure nothing has changed. And if you find there's an issue, you and your realtor will address it before you sign, because after closing, your leverage drops dramatically. Which brings us to number 8, closing day. Because closing is the culmination of everything. And in Texas, closings typically happen at the title company, either in person or with some remote components, depending on the situation. And there are 2 things that happen at closing: the signing and the funding. The signing is where you and the seller sign all the closing documents, the deed, the settlement statement, the loan documents, if applicable, and various disclosures. And the funding is when the lender wires the loan proceeds and the transaction officially records with the county. And until the transaction has funded and recorded, the home is not technically yours. So on closing day, expect to bring a valid ID, the money you owe to close, which should be sent by wire well in advance and confirmed with the title company, because wire fraud is a real risk in this industry. And bring a little bit of patience because closings can run long. And once a transaction funds and records, the title company will typically hand you the keys, and that is when the home is yours. Now let's hit a few quick questions that we get sometimes. The first is, how long does the whole process normally take? And the answer is, for most Texas transactions, it's somewhere in the range of 3 to 6 weeks, with cash transactions on the shorter end and finance transactions in the middle to upper end. Although the exact timeline depends on the contract, the lender, and any complications. The second is, what happens if we have to delay closing? And the answer is that delays usually require an amendment signed by both parties, and delays can create issues with lock periods on your interest rate. It can create problems with your moving logistics, and it can create problems with the seller's own plans. So any delay should be discussed with your realtor and lender as soon as it comes up. The third is, what do I do if something feels wrong during the process? And the answer is, say something immediately, because most problems get bigger the longer they go unaddressed. So if you get an email that seems off, if a wire instruction changes at the last minute, if a document does not match what you expected, or if a deadline seems to be slipping, call your realtor and your title company directly. Do not just respond to email, because wire fraud specifically is targeted at buyers in the final days before closing. The fourth is, can I do a walkthrough before the final one? And the answer is that additional visits during the contract period usually requires the seller's cooperation, but many sellers are willing to allow measuring visits, contractor visits, or design visits during the escrow period as long as it's coordinated through their realtors. Fifth is, what is the single biggest mistake you've seen buyers make during this window? And if I had to pick one, I think it would be treating the effective date as the finish line rather than the starting line, because almost everything meaningful happens between the contract execution and the closing. And the buyers who stay engaged, responsive, and clear-eyed through the whole process tend to have much smoother closings than the ones who go quiet after their offer is accepted. So to recap, number one, contract execution and the effective dates set every other timeline, so confirm it in writing. Number two, deliver your earnest money and option fee within the short windows the contract requires. Number three, the option period is your due diligence window. Use it well. Schedule inspections early and choose an inspector who fits the property type. Number four, repair negotiation is a normal part of the process. Focus on the systems instructions and structure completed inside the option period. Number five, appraisal and lender activity runs in parallel. Respond fast to document requests and avoid changes to your financial picture. Number six, title work is happening in the background, and the title commitment should be reviewed carefully for easements, liens, restrictions, things like that. Number seven, the final walkthrough confirms the conditions, if there was any repairs done, and included items that were included in the sale before closing. And number eight, closing day involves signing and funding. And until it funds and records, the home is not yours. The takeaway is simple. Understanding what happens after your offer is accepted transforms this window from stressful to manageable. And if you're getting ready to make an offer, or you're under contract right now, or you just want to understand how this process actually works before you start touring homes, I would love to help you. Again, I'm Caroline Deckard, broker with the Park Properties Group and the Phyllis Browning Company. Thanks for spending part of your day with me. I'll see you on the next one.